Community Service Society Senior Director, Carrie Tracy. And now, please welcome the 57th Governor of the great state of New York, Governor Kathy Hochul.
Good morning and thank you. I don't need to tell any of you that New Yorkers are facing a crisis of affordability. From the gas pump to the grocery bills to the monthly rent, and yes, to the utility bills. The costs of daily life just keep going up and up and up. And I'm particularly concerned about how these costs are affecting our seniors. You know, these are people living on fixed income. You know, they've earned their wages, and now they have a finite amount of money coming in, mostly from their Social Security checks. These are our parents, our grandparents, our neighbors. But what is so distressing to me is that the number of older New Yorkers who are now living in poverty has jumped over 50%. Think about that. At this point in their life, when they should be enjoying the golden years, after a lifetime of work and raising families and contributing to their communities, they find themselves in poverty and struggling to pay their bills. And these are the ones who've got more prescription drugs bills, more prescription drugs than the rest of the population. They have medical bills. They're trying to get to the doctor. And as I mentioned, utility bills. You know, you keep the heat warm in the wintertime. You have to keep it turned up. As much as you'd like to keep your costs down, you have to turn the heat up. And that's why, from the very beginning, my administration has been laser focused on doing everything in our power to keep costs down for people of all ages. You think about what we just proposed in our executive budget, tax cuts, the largest tax rate reduction for the middle class in 70 years. Our inflation rebate, which says because everybody paid so much more for everything, we collected more in sales tax, resulting in an additional $3 billion. I want to put that back in people's pockets. Covering the cost of child care, helping people with little kids with our child and infant tax program. Covering the cost of meals in schools. And there's so much more. But the ultimate goal is not to just help New Yorkers get by, but actually to get ahead. But all of a sudden, when something happens, when we're trying to put money back in these pockets, and there's other forces taking money out of the pockets, now we've got a problem. And I'm talking about efforts to raise utilities here in the city of New York for 3 million ratepayers by anywhere from 11 to 13 to 14%. Shocking. And this is a real hit on families. They didn't budget for this. They weren't planning for this. And these bills going up upwards of $500 a year. I'm trying to put $500 back in their pockets because of the inflation rebate, and it's going to go right out the door to pay this bill? Come on, how are they supposed to get ahead? This is intolerable to me. And I want to say this. I've talked to too many parents. I've gone to local restaurants, go to the shopping malls. I talk to everybody. Anybody who'll talk to me, I talk to. They're proud to live in this state. They love this state. They want to raise their kids here. But it's getting harder and harder. And I've got to just say, we're listening to them. And that's why today I'm calling on the Department of Public Service to reject Con Ed's proposal for these exorbitant rate increases. Here I have a letter that I'm sending to the DPS chair and CEO, Rory Christian, that I'm going to sign right now, that expresses my strong objection to what they're proposing to do New Yorkers at this time when they just don't have the money to pay these bills. I'll sign it now, make it official. There. This is a statement of my priorities as governor to protect our citizens from the costs of everything going up, but starting with their utility bills. And I'm going to make sure they understand how important this is to me. But I'm not stopping there. I'm also directing the Department of Public Service to conduct a first-of-its-kind audit of management compensation across the board. Because a lot of people are saying, why am I paying this when they're getting paid this much from that money? I want to make sure that they're being responsible in how they use our ratepayer dollars. So the burden is already heavy. You just listen to people. You listen to someone who's switching to dirtier heating oil because he can't afford his gas bills. We are trying to transition to a clean energy future. So raging forest fires that we saw in our own state don't ever match what we saw in Los Angeles. That the flooding events that we see elsewhere don't become the norm here in New York. The extreme weather we're experiencing, worse flooding, worse extreme temperatures, hottest temperatures, coldest temperatures, it's all happening right now in our state. And the culprit is climate change. And we are standing up strong against that. I don't want people to have to continue using dirtier fossil fuel-based energy because they can't afford these bills. That's where we have to stand up and say no more. Or should families be dipping into their emergency savings just to pay these bills? I'm going to continue making New York more affordable. I want you to know that. I'm a fighter. I'm going to stand up and say no. Go back to the drawing board and figure this out, but you're not going to get that kind of rate increase from our hardworking New Yorkers, particularly our seniors who are represented by Beth Finkel here today, representing AERP, who has a message to tell all of us about what this does to seniors. And if we don't start paying attention, then shame on us. They deserve a better life. They've given enough to New Yorkers. They've given enough to their families. They've given enough to their communities. And now it's time for us to start taking care of them. With that, let me bring up Beth Finkel and thank her for her great support for our seniors across the state. Beth, thank you. Thank you.
So on behalf of the almost 750,000 members of AARP that are right here in New York City, we are really appalled with this possible increase. And we really want to thank the governor for her leadership in opposing the Con Ed rate increase proposal. We need to do better to make sure that people can afford their energy bills now in the middle of winter, but also in the summer. We know that it's getting hotter and hotter, and we know that people have to stay cool. This is also a health issue, because if you can't stay warm, and if you're too hot in the summer, you're going to end up getting sick, and you're not going to be able to be in good health. It also puts, there are already 500,000 Con Ed customers that are behind 60 days or more on their bills. And they are so vulnerable to service disconnection. And they owe $1 billion. Think about that. How did we end up in that spot to begin with? And this is all about things not being affordable. So glad that the governor has called this out and taken a strong position about fighting this. Just yesterday, the Center for Urban Future released a report that said that New York City is now home to 1.4 million people that are 65 and older. And I'll tell you what's really upsetting, and the governor mentioned this before, 18% of the city's older adults live in poverty, below the poverty line. Again, that is unconscionable. And these high utility rates are contributing to it. So, Governor, I want to thank you again so much for working on this. As you said, older adults are on fixed income. And actually what we found is that 60% of the older people that were in that study said that they don't have any retirement income. So what does that mean? How do they ever keep up? More and more people are going to fall into the people who are in jeopardy of being disconnected. We can't allow that to happen. So, Governor, again, thank you for being a fighter on this issue. We love working on this issue with you, and we want to continue to stand with you on affordability. Thank you. Oh, and I want to introduce Carrie Tracy, who's from the CSS Community Service Society. Great work for New Yorkers. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Governor Hochul for inviting us to speak today about this very important issue. The Community Service Society of New York has worked with and for New Yorkers since 1843 to promote economic opportunity and champion an equitable state and city. These proposed rate hikes would be disastrous for low and moderate income New Yorkers. CSS conducts an annual survey of New York City residents called the Unheard Third. And in the most recent survey, we found that over a quarter of low-income New Yorkers, those living in or near the poverty level, reported having no rainy day savings. About 1 in every 6 low-income New Yorkers would not be able to meet an unexpected emergency expense like these rate hikes. Almost 45% of households living near and in poverty worried about making ends meet all the time or most of the time. And women, particularly Latina and Black women and families with children, are more likely to experience this kind of financial insecurity. So we'd like to thank Governor Hochul for her strong defense of families in New York and fighting these rate hikes. Thank you.
This concludes our program.